everyone, I'm Amy, this is my wife Maggie, and together we are ThinkerThemer. We review games from two different perspectives. I'm all about the mechanics and Maggie is all about the theme. Today we're excited to be reviewing Wingspan Asia, the standalone 1 or 2 player game and expansion for Wingspan by Stonemaier Games and designer Elizabeth Hargraves. So let's get into it.
All right, in Wingspan Asia, we are bird enthusiasts trying to attract all these different beautiful birds to all the different habitats with, the particular food that they like and making sure that, they kind of work well together to be happy, lay a lot of eggs, attract other birds, and ultimately all of these things are going to give us points that will mean that we may win the game if we manage to do that better than everybody else on the table.
Now, for those of you who have never played Wingspan before, I'm going to start with a brief overview of Wingspan. So if you have played Wingspan before and just want to know about this duet standalone expansion, please skip forward using the timestamps. But in Wingspan, ultimately what you're trying to do is fill out your individual player board that represents 3 individual habitats that certain birds like to go and live in. The birds take the form of these unique bird cards that all have a different bird illustrated on them and then a unique ability that occurs either at the time that you play the card down, throughout the rounds as you're reactivating it, between turns sometimes, or sometimes at the end of a round or at the end of the game. So there's many different types of powers that the birds have, but ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to fill up each of these habitats because the birds also have victory points that they're going to give you at the end of the game, and having them in your habitat allows you to collect points in a number of different ways. So the first thing to know about Wingspan is that there are 4 main actions that are available to you. You can play a bird by paying the food type that they require out of your own supply and then placing the bird down into the correct habitat as shown on the bird. Sometimes doing that also costs you eggs, which is another one of the actions, which is to lay eggs on birds. So once there is a bird that is in a habitat, you're able to lay eggs onto it, these beautiful eggs here, lay eggs onto it and store as many as their type of nest allows you to store. The third action that you can do is you can gain food from the bird feeder. Now, in the base game Wingspan, it does come with more of a physical bird feeder element. Here, the bird feeder is represented by this piece of faux wood, and we're going to be able to roll these dice on here, and basically you will be drafting these different die in order to collect the right types of food that the birds in your hand need so that you can work towards playing them in your habitat. The final action that you can do is you can draw bird cards. Now that's going to allow you to draft new cards into your hand from the market of cards available or blind from the top of the deck. But the key thing about this game is it's all about engine building, and the fun thing is when you activate one of these habitats that are associated with a different type of action. For example, here at the bottom of the board in the water kind of habitat, you can draw bird cards. So if I was to draw bird cards, the number of cards that I'm allowed to draft depends on how many birds I've placed in that habitat, with the action becoming more and more powerful with every additional bird. And not just that, but once I've also built out this habitat with birds, it becomes more powerful. But then as I move backwards through this habitat, I get to activate the power of any brown colored abilities on birds that I've placed in that habitat. And that means that as you go through this game, your actions become more and more powerful because of the individual bird powers that get activated. It also means that everybody starts to build out their own strategy because the powers that you choose to put in these habitats really starts to dictate the way that you strategize and what you focus on throughout the game. So now let's talk about the duet mode. So the duet mode introduces this new board here. So I should say that the regular Wingspan game can play 2-player count and it works perfectly fine. In this game, we're introducing this new board that has each of the different habitats depicted on the board, as well as a number of icons that represent characteristics of your birds. The way that you get to use this board is that, as you noticed, when I was putting down these birds on my player board, I was pulling off these little tokens that represent yin-yang in the Asian continent. And as you put a bird down, every time you put a bird down, you're going to be removing one of these tokens and then placing it out onto this little puzzle board. So, for example, with this white-throated kingfisher, I would have had to remove a token, and now I get to place it down in the water habitat because that's where the bird has been placed. And then I need to choose a characteristic that represents that bird. So, for example, the kingfisher has this type of nest, so I could place it here. It also has fish as a food requirement, so I could place it here on top of the fish. We also look at the direction that the beak is facing, and you can see that the beak is facing right. So I could select this beak is pointing right icon and then take the bonus card. So I'd be able to draft another card. You can see along here, there's different types of bonuses. You can sometimes score a food resource or get a bonus egg as well. And why do I want to be building up my presence on this board? Well, Maggie and I are both going to be adding these tokens onto the board, and eventually at the end of the game, you're going to score 1 point for your largest contiguous group of connected tokens here. So we want to make sure that we're trying to build them out in an adjacent way. But the other interesting thing is the round end scoring that's going to be scored between Maggie and I is going to refer to this puzzle. So for example, here in round 1, we have tokens on nest type. So whoever has more of those is going to get the 2 points and the other player is going to get 0. There are no points for second place in the duet mode. The next one in round 2 will be worth 3 points, in round 3, 4 points, and in round 4, 5 points. So you can plan ahead and you can look at how you want to fill out that puzzle accordingly. Now, sometimes it might be the case that this board is so full that you can't place a token here, or you choose not to. And in that case, you can place your token in this space here on the board that allows you to bank it there. And on a future turn, you can remove that token in order to reset the bird feeder by re-rolling the dice here that represent food, or by resetting the bird tray, so changing the market of birds to freshen that up. So that gives you a little bit more flexibility in terms of what you want to do with the token. Finally, in the new duet mode in this expansion, you can actually add this game to the base game, which allows you to then play Wingspan with 6 or 7 players. Now, the way that this works is the group will be split into 2, and effectively each group are going to share 2 things. You're going to share a set of dice that represents the bird feeder for those individual groups, and the bird tray with the different birds that you can draft in it. So each group will have an individual collection of food resources and birds they can draft. But the interesting thing about the way this works is the groups are combined in every other way. So first of all, you'll be vying for those round end objectives in the Wingspan base game in the same way that you usually are, but with many more people and with friendly ties, which changes a little bit. But also, we will introduce this dial. This dial has 2 different sides depending on whether you're playing for 6 or 7 players. And what it's going to allow you to do is select 2 people around the table at a time, a pair of people in this combined space, and they're each going to play their turn at the same time. They're simply going to be just drafting from their individual components depending on which group they're in. And so 2 people taking their turn simultaneously and also playing out their actions or cards that affect other players across the whole group. So now let's talk about how we felt about the game.
All right. Well, I guess the first thing about Wingspan, I think the first thing about this particular presentation or this packaging of this game together is that it's really 3 things in one, which I love because it's so efficient.
It is very
and
efficient.
it's a fairly small box, so you're actually getting quite a lot in just like, this compact package. I love the fact that now you can just play it as a standalone 1 and 2 player game, and you don't have to bring a whole massive box. So if you're kind of traveling potentially,
or you may not even own the base game, and
if
you
you
always
don't-
play 2 players, in which case you can just purchase this and play Wingspan 2
yeah,
players.
Yeah. You can also play it solo, so it's a 1 to 2 player standalone game. I love that. Obviously, it's got the introduction of this, the new duet puzzle. The fact that then obviously you can introduce all of these birds, which again, beautiful, all unique cards, so incredibly thematic. I think that is by far the most impressive thing consistently about this game.
Well, it's had the same artists across all of the game and the expansions that have been released to date. But I have to say, I'm just going to grab this box. This box is...
the art on it.
Upside down. That this box is not just one of the most beautiful boxes from the Wingspan
stunning.
collection. This box art is one of my favorite box art that I have ever seen in our history of board gaming. I absolutely adore it. I think it is just gorgeous. As soon as I saw it, I was just floored by this. It is incredible, and of course they've chosen to showcase the peacock. It is amazing. I just love it.
Even though it's a small box, it's not a game that I ever want to store on its side.
No,
because I want to be able to see it. It's like I want to hang this so that it's prominently displayed somewhere.
It is beautiful,
and that carries through. I think that's also part of the other the magic of this game is as you're playing. Not only is all the bird cards unique, but so many times throughout the game, it doesn't matter how many times I play, I kind of stop and go, oh my goodness, look at this bird. It's just so beautiful. They're just so beautiful. And then you're also getting to learn, obviously, a bit about, what does the bird do and why? Because you have the little kind of fact about it underneath. There's also information about it in the rule book, which I really appreciate. I think that's...
it's always been one of the standout features of Wingspan, is the birds themselves. And if you love that about the game, you will also love that about the duet mode, and the duet mode and the new birds.
Yeah.
But the other thing I wanted to mention is that for this particular expansion, the boards that it comes with have been redesigned by the illustrators, so they are more vibrant than ever before. So everything about them functionally remains the same, so you can integrate it with the base game, but they've just been kind of changed a little bit in their tone of color. I really prefer these boards. I think they are bright, they stand out on the table, they're just absolutely gorgeous. If I was playing this with more players, I'd be fighting to have one of these boards. They're really beautiful.
Functionally they're the same, but really aesthetically you're better than everyone else.
They are superior. And in the duet mode, I didn't mention, but on the other side of this board, I'm going to make a mess here.
Oh no!
Yeah, I'm going to make a mess here. If you turn it over, there is also a very similar board to what you'd be familiar with looking at if you want to play with the Nectar or the Oceania expansion. So it allows you to integrate this with the base game in order to use those expansions, but it is worth noting that you can't play this expansion just with the standalone box. You do need to get all of those additional pieces.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Duet, because I want to talk about how the base game 2-player changes now that we've tried this. Because, well, first of all, I want to put out there that 2 players is actually my preferred player count for Wingspan. And the reason for that for me, if you watch the channel, you'll know that I prefer more player interaction in my games, and I find this to be a low interaction game, which means that when other people are playing around the table, I find myself just waiting for it to get back to my turn. And I don't have a lot of buy-in into what other players are doing around the table.
It can be a fairly your head is down and just figure out what you're
your
doing.
own
And
strategy.
a lot of times the things that other people are doing are not really affecting
Aside from
you.
please don't take my food that I need.
or the bird that I really got my eye on.
So for that reason, I do prefer the 2-player. We've played a lot of the base game 2-player, as well as this version. And so I want to talk about what this puzzle brings, because I will say that Wingspan is a perfectly great game at 2 players as is without this. If you have the base game, it's a relaxing experience. It moves very swiftly. But this duet puzzle actually gives you a reason to not focus on the puzzle of your player board, because the round end scoring conditions are based on this puzzle, and because this puzzle dictates what you need to be placing in your player board. This can fundamentally change your strategy. In fact, I found myself making suboptimal moves for my player board and my engine building because I was fiercely competitive about this duet board. I could see that Maggie was, like here's one horizontal rows, like getting the most horizontal rows with at least one of your tokens in it. So when you're looking at that distribution, you're like, well, this card's not actually going to add to that puzzle, and I really want to win this end round condition. You start going, is it worth it to put it here, or should I swap it out for another bird that's going to help me advance on that puzzle? And so it adds a new layer of strategy that I really enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt the same way, and I think one of the things with this puzzle is there's quite a number of points in that, not just all the ones that you're forgoing, if you decide to ignore it every single round. There's, I think, 14 points there, but yet that contiguous line of that connection thing. And I think in the earlier games I was like, I'm not even going to worry about that. I just want to do like the end rounds. And I've had games where I'm like, I'm going to probably, you kind of look around and you go, I might go for this one. I've already lost this one, and then I'm just going to do. But it's almost like I never wanted to ignore that puzzle, and I absolutely agree. It completely meant that sometimes in a regular game I would have been like, oh yeah, no brainer, I'll play that card. But now it's like, no, actually, I don't want to play any of these. I'm really invested in getting a particular card with a particular symbol because it's going to help me with the next round, or it's going to help me with So it definitely adds.
It adds the layer, but it also gives you an alternative focus if for some reason you're not as good at the engine building component of this game. It's me I wasn't going to name names.
Not pointing any fingers.
But Maggie has never won Wingspan against me
against people. I won against the Automa, which we'll get to in a bit.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a bit. But I just wanted to say that Maggie got very close in the duet game, within a couple of points, because I was so focused on playing how I usually do, focusing on optimizing this engine, and Maggie was completely dominating this puzzle. So she had the longest connection. You won every single end round. And I was like, I'm not going to put my efforts into here. I'm still going to focus on the engine building. But that was a really close call. And what that suggests to me is that if you're tired of, being beaten by your spouse or your friend at, this particular component of the game, this introduces a new way to get some incidental points that might, push you into the lead. So I really like that as an option. In terms of this versus the base game, I think they're both perfectly good at 2 players. But for my preferences, I probably do like adding this little bit of complexity.
I agree. So if we were to play this at 2 players, it would be this version. I will highlight one little not so fun thing about this, or gripe that I have with this, and it's the fact that these beautiful tokens, the beautiful yin yang tokens that fit so. It's so satisfying the way they fit together. They never meet on the board or anywhere in the game. And it just feels like such a missed opportunity, because all I want is for these symbols to meet at some point. And you end up with obviously a board of what is then just these like disjointed little tears. The tears of why did this never come together? I would not have it, a different way. I'm not saying that it should be a different, shape, but
it's a theme is heartbreak. Theme is heartbreak.
Because you're only one person obviously is allowed in each one of these spots.
Yes.
But why?
No.
Maybe that'll come later. Maybe I'll just put in a request for consideration, for your consideration.
The other thing I wanted to talk about is one of the more interesting bird abilities that gets introduced into this game. So we've had these predatory birds that have been in across all of the other expansions, and they do tend to, gobble up the food in different ways. I think that this is a really interesting component of the Asia expansion, particularly in that it introduces a push your luck mechanic. And so a lot of the predatory birds that are in here, when you play them and they get reactivated, there, for example, this purple heron is going to allow me to choose any two dice and then roll them up to 3 times. However, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the little grub caterpillar here, and I'm trying to get the fish. If I roll them and I get one of those...
always does.
No.
I never do. I always fail at the first roll. And Amy always...
So I get to now have that bank it, and now I get the opportunity to roll again if I want to. If I want to, and I again roll one of those symbols, I'm adding to that collection, which are ultimately going to be cached on here onto my card, and they're going to be a point at the end of the game each. Or I can stop and not risk it, because if I don't roll one of those symbols, I lose all of them.
All or nothing.
And that is a really fun little game that you get to play on your turn whenever you activate this type of card. It was one of my favorite new elements of the game. It just gives you that sense of control over, well, oh, should I just stop and get one because I've had a bit of luck go my way? Or should I continue rolling because someone is about to win the game and I really, really need to just try and get as many victory points as possible?
Also invigorates the table, because all of a sudden the entire table is invested in, like, oh, are you going to get it? Are you going to go for it? Go for it. Come on. And so it adds this sort of, bit of fun and again, interest in what the other person is doing, where sometimes you may not be as invested because they're going to lose it all. So that's, I think if you're just playing and it's like, oh, if you roll it, you get it. It's like, oh yeah, whatever. But it's like the fact that it's like you can roll it up to 3 times, and each time you're really, you could lose all the stuff that
So I think that
really works.
I think it brings it back to this expansion is worth it just for the new cards alone, because if you're playing as a group, as we were, we just integrated the Asia cards into our group game, and then all of a sudden there's this new element, and of course there's all these new birds, and there's new scoring cards as well, so the goal cards. And so, you know, as an expansion, it really works. As a 2-player game, it really works. And the final component is this added ability to play flock mode. We haven't tried playing flock mode, only because when we're under embargo, it's very hard to get a big group of people together. But also,
the player count is one of the things that you prefer.
I do prefer this game at a smaller player count, but I can totally see that if you are surrounded by people that love Wingspan and you want to get together as a big group, this offers a way to do that, and in a very convenient package, because all you need is the base game. You get this and it unlocks all of the additional things.
And I'll just show here what the other side of where the duet board is. This is the flock mode board. So this is where you would have your, you wouldn't be using these end of round scoring objectives. You'd be using the ones from your base game or from the other expansions. Put them here, and obviously now it's got more spaces. But again, now it's going to be friendly ties. So you're no longer going to be going, oh, if I have multiple people in here, then you're kind of splitting the points and then people skip. So it's just friendly ties, which I think makes it a little bit more straightforward. These are also double-sided, and there's more in the box for the duet side. So you always have lots of replayability with this, which is also really great. Should we talk about solo mode?
Yes, please.
All right.
Do.
So solo mode, this is one of those games, like in general, Wingspan is one of those games that a lot of people really enjoy playing solo, myself included. Biggest part of the solo mode tends to be fairly straightforward, in that it's just you've got a deck of automa. I've got sort of objectives there. You've got your automa cards, and then there's going to be a round card. So, for example, for round 1, as you're playing cards, it would be dictating. It tells you, well, what's going to happen in that round. So, in this instance, the automa is going to be getting cards, because ultimately, when you're competing with the automa, and there's different levels of difficulty, they're going to be collecting cards. They're going to be collecting eggs. Sometimes they collect food tokens, but it's done in a much more simplified way, so that then you can have a bit of at the end go, well, let's tally up the scores. And again, whenever I play the highest difficulty, I will usually lose, which is a good thing, because it means that I've definitely not cracked the core of the puzzle in terms of the engine building. With the duet mode, so that's for the regular mode that you would be familiar with. With the duet mode, you now introduce Where's my other card? So now you actually, I'm just going to move this down. So you now have a second card. So now there are, when you're deciding, as you've got your automat deck, when you're placing a card for the automat to take a turn, there's going to be two sides. So both sides are going to be pointing to whatever round it is. And the reason why you have this new side is because sometimes, like in this instance, you're now going to need to decide whenever it takes this action or this action, so the getting a card or refreshing sort of face down card or face up card, so getting the points of face up, it's going to be placing tokens in the duet board. And this is this new card dictates what's the hierarchy for that. So essentially what happens here, and there's two different ways of doing it based on whether it was this icon or this one that got triggered. You have three different sections. One is determining which corner of the board would it start prioritizing, so sort of in terms of direction. So you would base that on whatever icon is on that line. So even though we're in round one here, if we were looking at direction first, it would be looking at this pink, activate all pink powers, which means that we'll be looking at top right. So at the moment, this would be prioritizing from top right and coming down. And you'd kind of do it in like sort of backwards reading type in this instance. Then the other element would be in terms of the type or the type of either nest, food, or beak. So that's the other kind of symbol. And again, you'd be looking in this instance, it's also matching with the pink. So this would be a beak, beak direction. And the other type is the habitat. So this is where it'd be going, okay, so if there's nothing, so you see here that there's no icon, it's the nothing icon, and so it would be water. So that's where then you'd be deciding, okay, so we know direction, and we know, water, and we know that it'd be beak. So for example, it might be here, so water here. I've kind of given you that very based overview. However, this is one of the things that I found a little bit more clunky when compared to the straightforward solo mode. And this is what I would usually prefer if I'm playing solo. I probably would not be playing with the duet board because of that. Because there's two different ways, and they've kind of put this little player aid together to show you that there's, again, two hierarchies. When it's this icon that's triggering that, then you'd be going habitat first, and then this sort of beak, food, nest, and then the direction. Whereas when it's this other icon that's triggering it, it's going to be looking at, well, what's going to be the next objective for that round, and then just going from direction of a corner. Just the fact that there's two different ways of having that hierarchy, and then the fact that you're kind of going, because at every round, the order of where those things are sitting and the icons are different, I found that it really stunted or stopped the flow of what I was trying to do. And I usually really struggle when I have an AI that I have to facilitate. If the AI is fairly straightforward, like in the base game, where it's just, they're doing that, perfect. And now I come back to my game, no issues. But in here, I did find that it was just enough. And I know that a lot of people are not going to have any issue with that and are going to find, that super, they'll wrap their head around it and they'll be able to kind of go with it. But I found that even in like over multiple games, it still stopped my flow of the game. So I probably would not be playing with this duet mode as the solo. The downside of that is if you're getting this as a standalone to play solo, you're going to be forced to do this because all of the objectives, the end of round objectives that come with it are only for the duet mode. So this is where, in my scenario, we do actually have a copy of the base game. So I would be playing this solo. I would be mixing these cards because I love these birds. I love all of the birds, but these birds are, you have that kind of the push your luck sort of thing with them. But I would be using the normal or the base side, not the duet.
For solo, yeah.
Yeah,
I think to summarize our feelings on this to me is an absolute, almost no-brainer. I can completely see the role for this expansion, and in fact, functionally speaking, it might be the most value that I've ever seen packed into an expansion, because expansions are, one of those things that as we play more and more games, we don't get time to go back to expansions, but because this is a standalone game, you can have it as well as the base game and get it out when you want to have a more tense two-player experience. But Also, if you're just getting into Wingspan, this is the perfect place to start. You can play it 2 players, and if you find that it resonates with you, then you can build out from there.
Yeah.
And as soon as you then get the base game, you've also got this option of playing 6 or 7 players, so it's giving you that as well. And if you just want new birds, you can get it for that reason. And I believe there's also going to be the nesting box available through Stonemaier, which comes with the Wingspan Asia built in. So you get everything aside from the box, which means that from the get-go, you've got the ability to play in duet mode, you've got all the birds in there, and you also can play 6 or 7 players. So it's just a really smart expansion that means that you don't have to get that nesting box. You can just pick this up, and then you've got all of that functional content. And I love the artwork of the new boards. I really, really think that they've done a fantastic job.
This is a great production, overall. Oh, the other thing that I wanted to mention is now there's a big change towards much more sustainable packaging. So now you'll see that they've introduced the kind of little tray is, I don't know what material it is, but it's almost like a much more, obviously, bio-friendly, almost cardboard type. And even the baggies that come in the components come in are like a much more, I don't know if they're compostable or like a biodegradable sort of thing. So I want to call that out as a great,
it's a step in the right direction.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah, and we really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I just love what Elizabeth has done to develop this duet mode. I think it's really, really clever.
Yeah.
I think I would pull this out before Wingspan, the original, to play 2 players with Maggie.
Players. Absolutely.
So for that reason, we're now giving our games a score out of 10. I would give this a 7.8 because I actually think that if you're just getting into Wingspan for the first time and this is the 2-player mode, this is a really meaty 2-player experience. You get all of that joy of the engine building. And for me, I don't have to wait as long for it to get back to my turn. So I just think it's a really engaging 2-player experience. And if you look at it through that lens, it's incredible. If it was just the birds, I'd be like, well, if you really love Wingspan, then get more birds. But because it opens up so many other new gaming opportunities and expands the occasions for Wingspan, I mean, it's great.
If there had been no Wingspan before this, and this just came out as, hey, this is a 1 to 2 player
I think
game,
it would blow your mind.
This is it's almost like the previous success of Wingspan is giving this an unfair kind of bar or standard because as its own box, it's an excellent production. So I'm gonna give this an 8. For me, because again, it doesn't I can't convey the replayability just from the sheer number of cards alone and the variety of them and how beautiful they are. And again, it's like I go through that deck and it's like every time I play, it's like I see a bird for the first time. I'm like, oh, well, I haven't seen that one before. How is that possible? I want to learn more about it and I want to see more. So I think, it's such a beautiful game.
Yeah, new gamers into the Wingspan universe and seasoned gamers in Wingspan who just want to see those new birds and some of those new powers that they have. I think everyone's going to be quite excited about this.
I'll add one quick little thing. So for solo, I will be playing with the base side and my base objectives, this board, and definitely these cards added into the mix. That's my combo. Just because I can.
The ideal combo of things.
I can pick and choose and make the perfect combo for me.
Thank you for watching this review. If you enjoyed it, please hit like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll be back with more board game content soon. But otherwise, bye for now. Bye.